Pause the video now. Before continuing, answer with total honesty. Would you be capable of killing someone? Don't answer quickly. Think about it for real. Most people will say never, ever, under any circumstances, but science has a different answer, and it's going to deeply disturb you. In the next 10 minutes, you're going to discover something about yourself that you might prefer not to know. You'll understand why practically any ordinary person can become a killer under certain circumstances. And at the end of this video, you're going to take a psychological test that has been applied to thousands of people around the world, and the results are absolutely disturbing. If you leave now, you'll continue believing in a comfortable version of who you are. But if you stay, you'll discover the truth about human nature that we all try to hide. I'm Lady Mind, and this is the psychological test no one wants to take. Before we begin the actual test, I need to tell you about one of the most controversial experiments in the history of psychology. In 1961, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram wanted to understand how the Holocaust had happened. How could ordinary people, family men, honest workers, have been capable of committing unimaginable atrocities? The answer most people gave was simple. They were monsters, psychopaths, people fundamentally different from us. Milgram suspected the truth was much more frightening. He recruited volunteers for what would supposedly be an experiment about memory and learning. Participants believed they were helping science understand how punishment affects memorization ability. Each volunteer was designated as a teacher and had to apply electric shocks to a student every time they gave a wrong answer. The student was in another room but could be heard through an intercom. The shocks started at 15 volts and progressively increased to 450 volts, a potentially lethal level. Here's the crucial detail. There were no real shocks. The student was an actor working with Milgram, but the teachers didn't know this. They genuinely believed they were causing real pain, possibly even killing someone. And you know what happened? 65% of participants went all the way. 2/3 of ordinary people, randomly recruited, applied what they believed to be potentially fatal shocks to an innocent stranger, simply because a man in a white lab coat said the experiment needed to continue. Let that sink in for a moment. They weren't trained soldiers. They weren't criminals. They weren't people with a history of violence. They were people like you and me. And when the students started screaming in pain, begging them to stop, mentioning heart problems, the teachers were visibly distressed. They sweated, trembled, laughed nervously, protested, but they continued. When the researcher simply said the experiment requires that you continue, or you have no choice, you must continue, most obeyed. They would kill someone, or at least believed they were doing so, just because an authority figure, in a context that seemed legitimate, ordered them to. Now, you might be thinking, I would be different, I would have stopped. Statistically, you probably wouldn't have. And this is just the first layer of uncomfortable truth about human capacity for violence. Let's go deeper. 3 years before Milgram's experiment, psychologist Solomon Asch had already demonstrated something equally disturbing: social conformity. In his experiments, people denied the evidence of their own eyes, just to not disagree with the group. They showed lines of obviously different sizes and asked which was longer. When actors in the experiment gave clearly wrong answers, 75% of real participants agreed with the group at least once, even knowing they were wrong. This means we don't just need an authority telling us what to do. Sometimes it's enough that other people around us are doing something for us to do it too. Think about historical genocides. Rwanda, in 100 days, approximately 800,000 people were massacred. Not by a professional army, but by neighbors killing neighbors. People who had lived side by side for years, who had shared tea together, whose children played together. Suddenly, one ethnic group began exterminating the other. Later studies showed that many perpetrators weren't motivated by intense hatred, but by social pressure. If you didn't participate, you and your family could be the next targets. Violence became the norm, and not participating meant becoming dangerous. Here's another uncomfortable question. Would you kill to protect someone you love? Most people answer yes without hesitation. If someone were about to kill your child, your partner, your mother, you'd do anything to stop them. This is biologically programmed in us. But do you realize what just happened? You just admitted there's a circumstance in which you would kill. You drew a line, but the line exists. It's not a question of never, it's a question of under what conditions. Let's expand that circle a bit. Would you kill to save 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people? It's the famous trolley problem. A train is coming toward 5 people tied to the tracks. You're standing next to a lever that can divert the train to another track, but there's one person there. Do you pull the lever? Most people say yes. Killing one person to save 5 is, mathematically, the right choice. But now change the scenario. You're on a bridge over the tracks, and next to you is a large person. If you push that person off the bridge onto the tracks, their body will stop the train and save the 5 people. Do you push? The math is identical. 1 life for 5, but most people say no. Why? Because killing with your own hands feels different from pulling a lever, even though the result is the same. This tells us something fundamental. Our morality isn't absolute. It's contextual, emotional, manipulable. And if you can be manipulated to kill in defense of others, you can be manipulated to kill for other reasons that seem equally justifiable in the moment. During World War II, ordinary soldiers, many of whom had never hurt anyone in their lives, killed thousands. They weren't psychopaths. Studies show most suffered immense psychological trauma afterward, but in the context of war, with their comrades beside them, with orders from superiors, with the narrative that they were fighting for the greater good, they did things they would never imagine doing in peacetime. Psychologist Dave Grossman extensively studied how the military trains soldiers to kill, because it doesn't come naturally to most people. In World War II, studies showed that only 15 to 20% of infantry soldiers fired their weapons with intent to hit the enemy, even under fire. Most shot high or simply didn't shoot. The instinct not to kill is strong, but the military developed conditioning techniques that increased this rate to 90% in subsequent wars. How? Through repetition, desensitization, dehumanization of the enemy, and group reinforcement. In other words, anyone can be trained to kill if you know how to condition the brain. Now, let's talk about something that will make you even more uncomfortable. Distance. It's much easier to kill someone the more distant you are. A drone pilot can launch a missile that kills dozens of people and go home to dinner with family as if it were a normal workday. Not because they're a monster, but because physical and emotional distance creates a psychological barrier. They don't see the faces, don't hear the screams, don't feel the blood. It's just a point on a screen. Pressing a button feels different from pulling a trigger, which feels different from using a knife, which feels different from using your hands. The more we abstract violence, the easier it becomes. This has terrifying implications for our modern society. We live in an increasingly digital and distant world. We can wish harm on people online with frightening ease because they don't seem real. They're just names on a screen. Studies show empathy dramatically decreases when we interact through screens. That's why cyberbullying is so prevalent. People say and do things online they would never do in person. And if physical violence becomes as mediated as verbal violence already is, history suggests we'll become capable of terrible things. Here's another crucial variable: deprivation and survival. Would you kill for food if you were starving to death? Would you kill to protect your last water resource in a social collapse scenario? History is full of examples of civilized people resorting to cannibalism, murder, total barbarism when social structures collapse and survival is at stake. The siege of Leningrad, famine in North Korea, survivors of accidents in remote locations all tell stories of how quickly civilized morality crumbles when death is imminent. The truth is, we're animals, and when survival instincts are activated, the thin layer of civilization can evaporate. Now, to the most subtle psychological component: dehumanization. It's almost impossible to kill someone you see as fully human, equal to you. That's why every genocide, every war, every mass violence begins with dehumanization. The Nazis called Jews rats and parasites. The Hutus of Rwanda called the Tutsis cockroaches. During slavery, Africans were considered less than human. During conflicts, the enemy is always portrayed as monster, barbarian, evil, incarnate. Once you believe the other isn't fully human, killing them becomes immensely easier. And we do this all the time on a small scale. We label people as human trash, scum of society, monsters. Every time we do this, we're practicing the same dehumanization that enables mass atrocities. So, back to the original question: would you be capable of killing? The honest answer, based on decades of psychological research, is yes. Under the right circumstances, practically anyone is capable. If a legitimate authority orders it, if the social group supports it, if it seems necessary for survival, if it's at sufficient distance, if the victim is sufficiently dehumanized, if it's to protect someone you love, you probably would. This doesn't make you a monster, it makes you human. And recognizing this is the first step to ensuring you're never in these circumstances, or that, if you are, you have enough awareness to resist. Now comes the part of the test I promised. I'm going to present 5 scenarios. For each one, answer honestly to yourself. Would you kill in this situation? You don't need to comment, you don't need to share, it's just between you and your conscience. But be brutally honest. Scenario 1. You're home late at night and hear someone breaking down the door. You have a small child sleeping in the next room. The intruder is armed. You also have a weapon. Do you shoot? Scenario 2. You're a doctor in a crowded hospital during a pandemic. You have 1 available ventilator and 2 dying patients. One is 30 years old and has 2 small children. The other is 75 years old and alone. Your choice of who receives the ventilator effectively condemns the other to death. What do you do? Scenario 3. You witness someone sexually abusing a child. You have a weapon. The police are 30 minutes away. The abuser has already noticed you and is grabbing the child to flee or silence them. Do you shoot? Scenario 4. The world has gone through total collapse. There's no government, no law, no food in stores. You haven't eaten in 6 days and your children are starving to death. You find a small food supply being guarded by a stranger who won't share. You have a knife. What do you do? Scenario 5. You discover someone is planning to blow up a school where 300 children are studying, including your nephew. You know where the terrorist is, but the police don't believe you or won't arrive in time. You have access to them. Do you kill them to prevent the attack? If you answered yes to any of these scenarios, congratulations, you just admitted that yes, you would be capable of killing under certain circumstances. And there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you bad, it makes you human. The question was never whether you would kill, but under what conditions you would kill. And once you recognize these conditions exist, you need to ask yourself, how manipulable are these conditions? Who could create scenarios where killing seems not just justifiable, but necessary? The most disturbing truth of all is this: the greatest evils in history were uncommitted by people who thought they were evil. They were committed by people who were absolutely certain they were doing the right thing. The Nazis believed they were saving the human race. The Inquisitors believed they were saving souls. The colonizers believed they were civilizing savages. Terrorists believed they're fighting for justice. In their own minds, they are the heroes. And this is the most crucial lesson: evil rarely looks like evil to those committing it. It comes disguised as duty, necessity, justice, protection, the greater good. So what do we do with this information? How do we live knowing we all carry this capacity? First, by recognizing it. You can't protect against something you deny exists. Second, by remaining vigilant against the conditions that activate this capacity. Question authority. Question group narratives. Question dehumanization. Question when violence is presented as the only solution. Third, actively cultivate empathy. The more you see other people as fully human, with stories, fears, and loves like yours, the harder it becomes to hurt them. And fourth, understand that morality isn't automatic. It's a constant choice, a muscle that needs to be exercised, a vigilance that needs to be maintained. Philosopher Edmund Burke said the only requirement for the triumph of evil is that good people do nothing. But I would say there's something even more fundamental. The requirement for evil to triumph is that good people do unrecognize their own capacity for it. Because when you believe you're incapable of doing evil, you stop policing yourself. You stop questioning. You become vulnerable to being manipulated into doing exactly what you swear you'd never do. Would you be capable of killing? Yes. And this awareness doesn't make you dangerous, it makes you conscious. And conscious people are infinitely less dangerous than people who believe they're above human nature. The real monsters aren't those who recognize the darkness within themselves, they're those who deny it exists and therefore don't watch it. If this video made you uncomfortable, good. It means you're really thinking. It means you're confronting realities about human nature that most prefer to ignore. And if you made it this far, you're exactly the kind of person who needs this information. Not to scare you, but to arm you with awareness. Because in the end, the greatest defense against becoming monsters is recognizing we have the capacity to become one. If you enjoyed this dive into the dark side of human psychology, leave your like. If you want more content that makes you question everything you think you know about yourself and human nature, subscribe to the Lady Mind channel and turn on notifications. In the comments, without going into details, just leave an emoji that represents how you felt after this test. And remember, knowing the darkness doesn't mean inhabiting it. It means being prepared to never let it control you. Until the next video, and may you always question not just the world, but mainly yourself.